Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our definition, or our derivation, excuse me, of what is sensorality. Dissensorality is disorderly. Last time we derived and discussed this prefix dis is one of these negating prefix, amoral, uniterate, anti, whatever, just different pieces of words or syllability letters you can put in the front of words, prefixes that negate the meaning of the base word. And so it also linguistically, it introduces the letter S. So we discussed that last time. Complete, compatible. Sensorality is compatibility. Compatibility works. Compatible, computable. Sensorality is computability. Calculation is computable. Radiation is emanation. Sensorality emanates. Resource, recourse. Again, another one of those direct iterations of S and C. Consequences are recourses. Consequences, recourse. What are wants and needs to cause an effect? Right, we're trying to pair up cliches, and that contracting syllability will show this differentiation of our base two, of everything. And so we've already done it with speciality, but we're continuing on. And so a want, right, your needs are the basis of wants, right? You have to satisfy eating, sleeping, hydration to stay alive, right? We've made in and biologically evident there's a difference between something you need and something you want. So if you don't have a need, that's a cause. And just trying to pair up the logic, and it doesn't have to, again, like, so there's no depth to thought. There's not going to be some high-flying logical, we're just threading the needle of this syllable or this letter. We're getting our concepts in the right place, and from that, the linguistics, the words representing that experience, that intuition, will be trivial. But it will show the linguistic iteration and consistency. And so, wants and needs and causes and effects. If I do something good, I'm cooking. If I do something bad, I get cooked. So what is this dichotomy of cooking? What is baking to cooking? Right? If I'm going to cook a meal, if I'm going to bake a meal, intuitively when I think baking, I think inside an oven. When I think cooking, kind of think of a stovetop, but it could also be like a campfire stovetop or a grill. But I guess that would be called grilling. But again, right, we're showing this differentiation and trying to find this stabilizing syllability. Desperate and disparate. We just talked about emanate, radiation emanates. Again, this para, P-A-R-A. And so that keeps popping up. Again, is that specifically Spanish? Obviously, it's a huge word, por or para in Spanish, but like, what do I make of that? Clearly it's in there. Efficiency is clearly based on CN. Science is clearly based on CN. But then we're showing this iteration, and we'll get that to a second. But just that para, separate, disparate, and then what's that iteration from desperate to disparate? Disparate being really spread out or separated, and desperate being, in serious need. Separation anxiety is separation desperation. So again, that's why, as Eric Weinstein fraudulently said, if it rhymes, it's wrong. If it rhymes, it's similar. And if you're similar, you can't be differentiated. If you can't differentiate, you can't form and retain new empirical meaning. And so we're kind of getting that sensation separation, sensation desperation. Ignore, and now to the specifics before when I said, what exactly, if we have in plus gore and we get ignore, same exact letters, and then they alternate, right? That to me is iteration. So we would say ignore is gore iterated by in. And so you take the base word, the complete word with more letters, and then the syllability of in gets separated into the word gore. In into gore is ignore. Now, integration is iteration iterated by ng. And so, again, clearly, literally is. So again, we're deriving all of the structure of language. Sensorality uniterates. Sensorality desensitizes. Expectation desensitizes. Iterating separates. Don't knock it until you try it. So what sounds have we derived in this series so far? Right, we separated clicking from snapping. Why snap? Again, I don't know, but that's just the order in which it presented itself throughout the derivation. We've also derived popping, right? Something pops into your head. You click a video, you click your pen. We've derived those fundamental sounds. And so, again, the order is what it is, just I have no intuition as to why that presented itself in the order it did. But what is a knock? And so from pop to knock. And again, linguistically, as we're completely breaking down sensorality. Again, conceptually, it's sen-sor-ality, 2 syllables. Again, that's that fundamental stability of 2 numerically, preserved the generality with ality. But this O, right, sensorality, and then we did sor-sonality. And then very clearly, again, speciality doesn't have an O in it. And so again, some numeric limit, some conceptual iteration going on with these different vowels. But intuitively, I definitely derived knock, right? Don't knock it until you try it. What is it? It is what it is. And so we have another one of those cliche phrases already in total generality, but it contains the word or the vowel O. And so in these fundamental verbs, click, snap, pop, knock, what is the function of these vowels? Right? Vowels vibrate. And so when you have these very simple verb words, those are our base words, bases, basis, something. Why does it change from O to A to I to E? What's going on there? There's certainly some logic behind it. Intuition is conceptual. Concepts are consequences. Sensorality is sequential. Chronology is sequentiality. A sequence is a gem, right? If you have a bunch of sequences on your dress, that's a gem, that's a rhinestone, that's a bedazzling, right? And that's another phrase that I always see through a lot of languages, razzle dazzle, in different forms and different sounds, but logically the sequence of razzle dazzle is always popping out to me. But like jewelry razzle dazzles, jewelry shines, shine bright like a diamond. What's going on there? Routine is stable. Mass is substantial. Sensorality is stantiality. In another one of those word forms where it's like substantial, clearly it's a sub, like prefix. And again, still back to that iterated versus amalgamated words, which we then identified as compound words. But then again, a word is a word, and a compound word is an adjective and word. And so it's like, we're trying to show this, again, we formed some sort of false paradox, we formed some sort of logical structure with inherent inconsistency, and then we're going to solve that or resolve that inconsistency with sensorality. But all of these pieces, again, this fundamental numeric limit of 2, sen-sor, has never been articulated in known derivation, known mathematics. And again, dimensionless analysis is purely where we've been in for, again, months now. And there's not a single bit of development logically from standard mathematicians that would begin to form these proofs and these identities. But to get to this completeness, incompleteness differentiation, you have to do all of the logic that is present, including all of the stuff that the structured mathematicians, so to speak, have never seen before. But sensorality is stantiality. Back to that again, substantial. Again, I'm assuming that's a negating or a modifying prefix, and then stantiality, or is that iterated? Again, like there's no clear iteration jumping out, or we can uniterate it, like ignore, we can pull out in and gore. I'm still not really sure what that has formed, or why did that, or what's going on there. But overall, again, I don't know specifically, but overall, again, it's this forming this false knot, this false paradox, this contradiction that doesn't really exist, and then showing sensorality, differentiating and resolving this not even inconsistency, but underdevelopment. And we're putting in all of these pieces. We know language is consistent. We know the solutions are out there. We're just trying to align the right concepts that will produce the right syllability, the letters, and that will solve sensorality and produce our new word form. I keep saying that, but I feel so close, and then we just keep going. But this is what we did with speciality. You'll see this over email if that ever gets published, because it's still profoundly illegal, but no one cares. Anyway, sensorality substantiates. A medium is a substrate. Sifting is sorting. So again, clearly, conceptually and linguistically, both start with S, both means censoring, sorting, separation, filtering. But sifting is sorting, and then we can remove all of the non-different syllability. What is if to or? Right? If then is kind of like the structure of a scientific statement or a hypothesis. If this, then that. If this or that. What is that? And again, these differentiations, I write them down in order as they come to me. Intuition is dynamic. Dynamicality is the opposite of staticality. Stable is not static. Again, back to riding your bicycle, which we derived. It's easier to balance when you're in motion as opposed if you just sit there on your bicycle and try to balance as opposed to riding down the street. Stable is not static. Stability is balanced. Is special essential? Again, trying to distill, bring down this simple question that contains the entire syllability of sensorality in a logical statement. What is the theme of mathematics? And that produces a new conceptualization, trying to do the same thing with censorship, with sensorality. Right? Essential sensorality is essential. Speciality is special. Right? So that's the complete natural definition of speciality. And then its operative word, which the word it connects to uniquely, is differentiation. And so we're trying to find this right question to ask. Is speciality essential? Is life essential to discover how the world works? Yes. But again, that's not the point. We're trying to just produce the syllability, the letters. Sensuality, consensuality, consent. So now here's that big absorption. Here's that for sensorality, right? Sensuality. And again, like I said, these are words that I've used my whole life. But when you're deriving them, the spelling it feels foreign. And so, meaning I didn't conceptually link that sensuality, consensuality, and then consent is when you go from that S to the T. And then again, alphabetically, it's a direct iteration from one element to the subsequent, the next element. Right, QRSTUV. And it even has that break, that rhythmic break, right, when you're reciting the alphabet in any language, and it's sing-songy. So that's because it's built on rhythm, from rhythm to algorithm. But sensorality is consensual. And so we just see that, again, that L from consensuality, consensual, sensuality to consent. Sensorality is consensual. Theme is the base of math. What's the base of physics? I would say, like, literally, it's mass, right? All of the concepts of vibration, the concepts of light, comes from that information being contained within mass. That is why you have all of those deep intuitions. And then I do want to say, anytime in this derivation, or right here on this series, or anytime you're dealing with anybody, and you feel, well, I would say specifically to this series, because we're doing the fundamentals. But when you feel like there's quote-unquote deep intuition, or like there's some avenue that we haven't explored, that's you conceptually feeling logical out of bounds. Like there's enough concepts to get you to where you're like feeling you're thinking something new, but then if you can't pose the right question, or you can't progress their logic anymore, it's because there's not there to progress. And so that feeling of what people have classified as deepness, like when I'm sitting here watching other people discuss things on YouTube, and specifically math, science, astronomy, the big questions, philosophy. It's like, oh, that's a really deep statement, or like they really have, right? Novel conceptualization, if people say words in a certain order, it will give you that intuition of something different. But if you feel like it's deep, or you feel like there's some sort of resistance, or some sort of pushback, specifically here, but pretty much in general, you're feeling that logical out of bounds where there's nothing there to describe, and it's not deep. It's not like there's no depth to realization. So that is when people say deep, like that's kind of what that's the experience they're trying to articulate. But back to the question, what's the base of physics? Again, linguistically, mathematics literally spells out thematics. But what word is spelled out by physics? And again, I like England, but maths is not plural. Mathematics is. Thematics is plural. Math literally is good, and goods are not good. Goods are products. We went through all of that. Point being is there's no direct linguistic basis of physics, but there is. Right? Again, phonetically, when you pronounce the word physic, is the base of physic. And so, but then you don't have physic, right? It's always physics. And so, linguistically, phonetically, you already have that physic, but physics, it's like pluralizing is. And then linguistically, you can clearly see, again, you can't like pull out a word, but is iterated with syllability. Physics, right? That S, there's the IS in sequentiality in order. Then PHYS is like the prefix, and then C is the iteration, and then S, that is at the end, physics. But then you get the pronunciation of is from the Y. And so physics is, and that's a natural definition. Physicality is ality. Sensorality is physical. And so just continuing on with our derivation, again, the concluding result to this whole derivation, if I'm alive to do it, which my rights continue to be violated, it's profound and extensive stress. It is literally every major felony you could possibly articulate. Clearly I haven't been murdered, but that hasn't been, like I haven't felt safe at any point during this whole process. 0% safe. I just don't care because my entire life has been a carnival, as we covered yesterday. So that is what I have for you today on derivation. I'm sure I'll come up with something else to do. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.